Again, everybody mute, and then we'll utilize our chat function. The bishop is going to start with an opening prayer. Then she will go in and say a few words. We'll quickly kind of bring some updates and where we're at to, and have your time to digest the PowerPoint. We'll go through it very quickly. It will not be death by PowerPoint, I promise. And then we will have some words from Larry, and possibly some words from Carl as well, Carl Andrews. So again, thank you all for being here. 144, just to say, I think like 2 more, and we break our record. Not that I'm competitive. And go from there. So it's so great to see so many people here. So Bishop, if you could open us in a word of prayer.
Again, I want to first say thank you, all of you, for taking your time to be with us today. It is good and faithful work that we are doing, so thank you for that. The Lord be with you. Let us pray. O Almighty God, you pour out on all who desire it the spirit of grace and of supplication. Deliver us when we draw near to you from coldness of heart and wandering of mind, that with steadfast thoughts and kindred affections, we may worship you in spirit and in truth, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. And I think you wanted to open with some reflection.
Yes, I did. I want to start by letting everybody know that every Monday, the entire House of Bishops and all of our canons to the ordinary are called to a call that is put out jointly by the presiding bishop's office and Episcopal Relief and Development, where we hear the latest counsel from the epidemiologists and folks that work for ERD. And every week we hear something new. Many of you may remember that back in February, we were being told that dogs didn't get coronavirus. And now we are learning that they do. We were told that children weren't affected poorly by coronavirus. And now we are learning that they are developing conditions after having had coronavirus that is sending a lot of children to the hospital. So one of the things that I'm aware of is that we know so little about this particular virus, and that we are adapting, all of us. None of us has ever done this before, and we are learning as we go. And to that end, one of the things that we have been told as a House of Bishops, and our canons have been told by the meeting of all of the diocesan chancellors and the head chancellor for the Episcopal Church, is that the Episcopal Church must follow the guidelines of state and local governments regarding the spread of coronavirus. We must follow those guidelines. And if the guidelines have discrepancy, we must go with the more conservative of those guidelines, because that is what protects us from liability and negligence. We must follow, at the very least, the guidelines of our state and municipal authorities in terms of what we should be doing in terms of spreading or stopping the spread of COVID-19. And there was this guy from Nazareth who talked to his followers and said something along the lines of, if someone takes your coat, give them also your cloak. If someone makes you go 1 mile, go ahead and go 2. And so what I've put together as a plan for the Episcopal Church of Colorado is my invitation for us as a church to go the extra mile, to proceed with extra caution out of abundance of love and care for our people. I am aware that over half of the members of the Episcopal Church are 65 and over, which is the increased vulnerable population to this particular illness. I am aware that we have people in our congregations with all sorts of underlying conditions that put them at risk for this. And so my request, my ask, is that we go the extra mile. We take the extra caution and time so that we do what's best for our folks. Now, this is not the only plan out there. There are lots of other diocesan plans. You can look at them. You can go over them. You can find wherein theirs are better than mine. But this is a plan that actually is born out of love and care and the desire to protect and keep our people safe. Now, you are, of course, free not to go along with this plan. If that is your choice, I ask that you let me know. But this is what I'm asking us to do, to hold together as a church together. And I'm going to let Alex go through it. We have been tweaking it. We have been changing it as we have needed to fit our circumstance. And we offer it to you in good faith. And hopefully with an understanding that this is, going from the best information we have and on how we are church together.
So a couple of comments before I begin. First of all, this plan was adapted from the original plan set out from the Diocese of Texas that was commended to us in that call, that the aforementioned call that the bishop talked about of all the canons to the ordinaries and bishops. We took it. It was given to Carl. Carl Andrews has been, I cannot say enough how wonderful he has been for us, both as a native Coloradan and all the other kind of past experiences, Candy Ordinary, and his disaster response coordination stuff has been tremendous. So he went through it, and we edited the slides together, mostly him, and got us to a point. And we've since edited even from the initial Clericus gathering, which I think was about 2 weeks ago. Time is, as I'm sure for all of you, is weird at this time. It's hard to remember what day bleeds into the next. But we took some feedback on that and really tweaked it a little bit, not tremendously. But the big thing I think is where we're at is we have heard loud and clear the original slides, again, heritage from the Diocese of Texas, talked about approval from the bishops. We do not want to be in a state of thumbs up or thumbs down. We realize, like Texas, Diocese of Texas is not the entire state, but is also a very big geographically diverse diocese, as is ours, 105,000 square miles, different context. We want to hear from you and be in conversation with you. There was one church in particular that got together. We talked about after Clericus, got together with the lay leaders and whatnot too, and talked about a plan. They originally submitted a plan. Our feedback to them was we felt it was more kind of the transition from season 2 to season 3. We had some great conversation. They recently represented a plan, and it is 180, well, not 100, it's much different in a lot of ways and much more in line. And it wasn't like you must do this, you must do that. We had to think things, they thought about things, they prayed about things, and I think they went the extra mile and got there. And part of that too was, for instance, just to highlight, we had the conversation, and where do you want to be? Carl Andrews has counseled us, and I think it's wise counsel, to really look at our priorities. What are the priorities that you want to get? And we'll have that kind of conversation with you. And that's where we want to start with. For theirs, it was about community and connection, and they felt this disconnect. So it wasn't their original plan, but they were talking at one point about doing kind of a drive-in service, which is doable within season 2. Something to think about, we can have conversations about. And one person pointed out, though, that if you're trying to build community, how is gathering in your cars and everybody getting in cars and not being able to get out and talk or whatever too, is that a better community building than, say, Zoom? And we didn't give an answer. We just kind of asked the question. And I think it may be different for different congregations. So, all that to say, we want to help and walk alongside with you. We have moved in a seasonal approach. Again, I want to highlight and work on a language that can be very confusing. The governor moves in phases. We move in seasons. We are a church. Some seasons are longer than others. Lent is a lot shorter than the season after Pentecost. for an example of that. Different seasons move different things and emphasize different things as well. So we chose the language of seasons. We also kind of wanted to frame it theologically as well, which is why we use the passage here from Isaiah. These are some things to think about. Those that are in Clericus, Bishop Doyle of Texas was also our speaker just by coincidence, and talked a lot about a VUCA world. And we are trying to provide vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. As we talked to there, we talked about that. It's not that we can provide certainty at this time. And I think as leaders and parishes, you've probably felt the strain of people wanting certainty. When will this be over? And the bishop alluded to an article in her statement on Tuesday, or went out in the digest about it being a mountain range. And it is. It's not, people sometimes think of this, and we talk about this, even I find myself guilty of this, talking about that it's going to be one kind of steep up and then down, type of thing too. But the reality is it's going to be a series of mountains. And again, to reemphasize the previous slide, it's going to be 12 to 18 months. So we are currently at season 1. This is our current reality to the end of May. I want to say that again. We are currently in season 1. And you can see what we've asked. Hopefully you've had a chance to review this. I won't go into stuff. Things I want to highlight is we are trying to model mask wearing, encourage people to do that in their churches, even if they are the only one filming in their church, which we know in a sense is, a little bit over and beyond, but it's about modeling behavior. People pay attention to church leaders and what we are doing. So we want to kind of model that behavior. We're asking to limit church office, especially we realize, people have to go in and get the mail and do that kind of stuff too. But just to, not go in there every day. The bishop staff is modeling that as well too. We are all working remotely to at least the end of May. Again, you can see kind of season 2 is what we want to move into, and this is where we'll spend most of our time. I'll go through the other slides fairly quickly, but Episcopal News Service also picked up our plan or whatever too, and kind of wanted to highlight it. And the reporter was pushing me to kind of look out, and I said, we are only looking at the transition between season 1 and season 2, because as the bishop alluded to, there is so much that we just don't know. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. So as Jesus said, today's troubles are enough. Well, the transition between season 1 and season 2 is more than enough for us to deal with right now. And we may, as time goes on, reevaluate plans as we go forward. And I want to say very clearly that what you start at season 2 may not be where you end up. For instance, if you start at season 1 doing something, you may look very different than what is going on in the middle of season 2 and the end of season 2. There will be progression during a season as we move through things. At this particular season, I also want to say in season 2, our hope is that you will stand with us and that we will continue in our Eucharistic fast. I think that is one of the highlights I want to be a part of, in the sense of I have taught to other clergy as well, and I get this having served in the parish for a number of years, not during an epidemic, but just the idea of it, that Eucharist is going to be a very big step for us. And what we don't want to see is parishes doing Eucharist and people commuting to other parishes that are offering Eucharist. Perhaps even from an hour or 2 away or so to seek out Eucharist. I think that will probably be divisive and not in unity of where we're at. So again, that's what we're kind of asking, that we kind of stand together on this and we really make that big shift to Eucharist together as one body. That is our hope. So all these through season 2 and 3 will be, and we need to kind of think about change our mindset. Everything needs to be virtual because, again, as the bishop alluded to, vulnerable populations. Yes, the 65 and older, but there's also people who you maybe in your congregation who may be immune compromised that you don't even know about, and may not want to disclose that. So there always kind of needs to be that virtual option. There will also be people who will just not feel safe going to church yet and gathering with that. And they may be even the silent majority in your congregation. So as we allude to later, I'll say it, now and say it later, you may want to do a survey to figure out what people would feel safe like going to church. What would it take? What would you need to do? And may, as we have changed our plans, may change your plans. So there's season 3 will look a lot different. And as we move into that, and we're all kind of looking forward to that day. Holy Eucharist will Zoom, but it will be with different guidelines as well. And we're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. I want to check out please tell us about members in our diocese been diagnosed and affected the virus. How many deaths? I don't know if we have that information. Do we, Carl? You would.
No, we do not, because no one has reported from their individual parishes. Mm-hmm. I have not heard of anybody directly. I've heard more than a handful who have been hospitalized, but no one who has died.
I've heard anecdotal stuff, but yeah, no firm number of people. We talked about it as being May 31st, Pentecost, or June 7th. Bishop?
I am being prayerful that at the end of May, we will have a clear sense of where we are, and that my hope is that we can start gathering under whatever guidelines our state and local government say are best on Trinity Sunday, June 7th.
And Amy brought up something too, for those of you who didn't catch it in the Diocesan Digest. I did a conversation with Michael Boney in the cathedral about the recent stuff that has come out about singing and how dangerous that is. Just real quickly, some of the things that caught my attention were they can go up to 27 feet and linger in the air for about 10 minutes afterwards, which is, and also, which we haven't done a lot of study, is also, I would think, maybe not quite to the extent, but also public speaking as well.
Yes, we're still learning. We're still learning.
So
we're still learning that piece about singing, not only for the spread of aerosolized virus particles, but also the inhaling, as you have to inhale to sing. So we're just learning that. So thanks for that question, Amy. To Brooks's question about low risk. So right now, some of the biggest outbreaks in Denver are in skilled nursing facilities and facilities where people our elderly population are in larger groups. So that would not be a particularly low risk pastoral visitation. Low risk pastoral visitation, if someone is recovering, they're not in a particular high risk group, you're not particularly symptomatic, so you take all of the precautions of face mask and all of those things to prevent the spread, that would be lowering the risk of pastoral visitation. I hope that got to what you were asking about.
Well, and to use some discretion as well too. I mean, obviously, I was thinking, like the 9-year-old who maybe, need a pastoral visit for depression or for something else, or just to kind of talk. That's a lower risk type of thing. That's kind of an obvious thing. But the other thing, I think it will just require some discretion, and above all, we're asking that you use all the protocols of safety and to be a part of that. So, we trust priests as well to kind of make that discretion for themselves and to err on the side of caution. And can we sing or preach with Mass? I haven't seen anything kind of conclusive about that. I did talk to Michael about that. I don't know if I talked to him before or after about that, but many musicians and directors of music have just said that singing with a mask is almost impossible. It just doesn't sound good. It's almost not worth it. So a lot of musicians have just said that they just kind of don't want to do that. And I will get back to over season 2. I mean, again, it's going to look very different, socially distancing, kind of looking over to maybe towards the end as we discover more, it could possibly be a choir. Who knows? I think, we can have a conversation and we're still kind of on a steep learning curve when it comes to that. One thing we are working on is, and one thing I just want to put in people's mind is, for those who are hearing impaired, reading lips is something that a lot of people do. So, we don't have an answer yet and would welcome wisdom on how we kind of get around that, because, if we are in mass and taking the abundance of caution, what will that do to our more hearing impaired people who look to lips? So there's still things that we're still on a learning curve, and welcome wisdom and creative ideas around that. But that's some of the things that we are looking at. I'm trying to keep up with the chat here too. It's going fast and fierce. Are there commercially made units with hosts and wine? Well, that just went away. Hosts and wine. Basically, I think they're talking about the little communion kits. And I don't think, again, we're kind of focused on the transition from season 1 to season 2. And we don't know what that's going to look like. I think we have to kind of think about down the line what communion will look like. All I can say is, and Bishop, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it will look very different to start off with than it has looked like before.
And to say that this is part of the conversation that I hope we are having as folks here in the Episcopal Church of Colorado. That what does Holy Eucharist look like for us in a way that is safe and protects all people? I mean, that's conversations I hope that we are going to be having as we transition from phases, as we transition from our seasons in step with what our government is mandating and advising.
Yeah, and I think so. As we progress forward, it'll be interesting to kind of see what those look like. But again, I think it'll look very different. So one thing I actually want to circle back around to season 2 and to get Larry's input in on as well is the idea around opening our building up slowly. I know a lot of people have said that pledging has been good, which is awesome to hear. But building use is a part of people's income. So, Ken and Carl and I have asked to kind of prioritize those groups. Who do you think would be? And I know Larry's beginning to do some work just as far, also from the liability lawyer kind of standpoint about that. So are you able to share with anything with us now at this point, Larry? Putting him on the spot.
Yes, I had to find out how to unmute. So yeah, first let me thank Bishop Kim and Ken and Alex for letting me join you all today. And thanks to all of you for participating, because this is vitally important. My perspective is generally speaking, making sure that we follow the canons of the church and the polity of the church, and that we, of course, minimize any exposure, and not just from a financial point of view or an insurance point of view, but because we don't want to do anything that is unsafe for any of our people, for clergy, staff, members, clergy leaders like yourself. So I want to echo what Bishop Kim said, that the safety of people is absolutely paramount in everything we do. In terms of looking at my little piece of this, which is how do we move towards a season of some reopening where we're very safe? It seems to me that there are a couple of principles that are pretty clear, and I don't expect that anyone would have any issues with them. And that is that as we look at reopening, we of course look to compliance with all governmental directions, rules, regulations, laws. There's no way that it would be prudent for any church to reopen at any level and in violation of those. So that's sort of the initial threshold. But beyond that, it's just because the governor says that it's time to do something, or it's okay to do something, we need to take, I think, a much broader look at that because it's pretty clear. One of the things that we do know is that prolonged personal contact between people without the social distancing and some super spreading events such as church services around the world and in this country are some of the very, very largest contributors to the spread of the virus. So we have to look at all of our churches and their unique vulnerabilities. And the bishop talked about this. We know we have, in many instances, a vulnerable population. So the fact that the governor may say, on May 8th, you can do this, on May 15th, you can do that, that does not necessarily work for us. And it would be, I think, unwise to just say, well, we will follow the dictates of the local authorities. We have a responsibility to all of our people to do much more than that, looking at the uniqueness of each church. And that uniqueness not only in terms of the kinds of vulnerabilities we have in our population, but the uniqueness in terms of our physical settings. And we may have some churches that can accommodate a reopening a little earlier than others. I certainly agree that it is important that something as important as the Eucharist, we are all on the same page at the same time, if at all possible. I think that for the reasons that Canon and Alex said. But we look at what our vulnerabilities are and what our opportunities are given our unique churches. And then I think it was really wise for our diocesan plan and for our bishop to say, once we've gotten some lessening of restrictions at the state level, we'll take at least 2 weeks or so to make sure that that was not an unwise directive from the governor. And so we do have this lag that I think is really very prudent and very important. We look at the local health conditions. I think we also take a sense of when it's time to reopen, and this is where Canon Carl will really come in handy. There is no question that there are a million details to look at. You know, which includes, do you do church on a much smaller scale, but you have it more frequently? Do you do the kinds of things where people effectively sign up in advance so you know how many people you're going to be dealing with? Of course, rules about touching and passing of the peace, passing of the collection plate, all of that, that's for season 3. That's not for today. But I think we're looking at all of that because we know how important it is. From my point of view, as I said a minute ago, to minimize our exposure, and here I really emphasize it's not to minimize our financial exposure, our liability exposure, but to minimize our chances of harming someone because we didn't do a complete and careful job of reopening. We have to look at these seasons and take them one step at a time. We really, really want to collaborate with you in terms of your own reopening and safety plans. There's no question that several people looking at a plan can really, I think, help improve it so that we have minimized the chances of people getting sick. In addition, in doing that, we also will be reducing our exposure for liability. And that's an important factor. It's not the number one thing, but it's important. And I have been in contact with chancellors from around the country and with the presiding bishop's chancellor and with claims people at church insurance. And, you know, church insurance, I have a great relationship with them, and I think they're a terrifically good and steadfast partner with all of our churches. You cannot get church insurance to say up front, if we get sued because someone got the virus at one of our worship services, will you defend us? They won't do that, and that's not unusual for an insurance company. But what we can do is if we have developed our own protocols in terms of what is the safest thing and the safest way to reopen a church, and if we have complied with those protocols, we have seriously minimized any issues, and we've increased the chances of church insurance covering us in terms of defending against that. I think you've heard, actually maybe you haven't heard, the season plan that has been presented to you previously and again today highlighted. There are several people at the National Church that are very, very pleased with that. And they've asked permission from us, which we've given them, to share it with other dioceses. So I think what the bishop has done with her team is put together a plan that is very, very focused on safety, not on speed. It's very, very focused on working collaboratively, working collegially with all of you. And we really are here to do that. If you have, when you get to the point of working on a reopening and a safety plan, we are happy to do some kind of an evaluation of that with you. And I can't encourage you enough that we all should be on the same page at the same time, even given our differences in terms of physical and geographical and size locations.
And
I
Larry,
hope that's a little bit helpful. Yes.
and Larry, things are going to be a little bit different, right? Is original question around to groups, right? AA is going to look very different than, I think somebody else alluded to a child care that may be renting out space or something like that too.
That's exactly right, Alex. And that we will have some legal obligations, for example, for preschools that rent our space.
Mm-hmm.
If the government permits them to reopen, in fact, we have worked with 2 churches already to review the preschool safety plans, and we will. Yep. That's really important. We can't probably stop them, but there are certainly serious issues about other third-party users, such as AA, Boy Scouts, food banks, where we really need to do it on a case-by-case basis. And I think I saw in one of the seasons, probably the 3rd season, that we can resume all outreach ministries. Well, we hopefully and prayerfully can resume most of them, but I'm not sure we'll be able to do all of them. We just have to look at them on a case-by-case basis.
And then we move to kind of season 4. I did notice the boilerplate. We'll get to it. I mean, hopefully it might help. Again, looking from season 1 to 2, we have worked with Carl and also borrowed a little bit from all the dioceses in Michigan as well to have some questions. I also want to say too that we've also consulted again as well our canons and bishops and everyone kind of nationally. We've talked to our Lutheran brothers and sisters. Carl is talking to health officials and everyone else kind of across the board. So we get a variety of kind of different opinions. We're checking out what other denominations are doing as well. But this is season 4, which will feel a lot more familiar to people. But we also want to do, along this, what are we learning? What are we learning about church? Somebody was telling me that they had a friend who said, I don't want church to go back to the way it was. And that reason that he cited was people are calling me on a daily basis to see how I'm doing. People are connecting with me. And why I think we focus so much, because we're good Episcopalians, on worship, and that is important to who we are. I think God may be calling us to really delve into what it means to build community and connection. And perhaps that's something that we can learn throughout these seasons that God is teaching us. What does it mean to really look after people and to be a part of that and to be in connection with people? So something to think about. These are questions.
Alex, real quick, someone asked something about children's ministry, about a vision for children's ministry. And I wanted to talk about how, we're all learning this, and something that I'm learning is that my kids, they, for the first time ever in their life, they got to pick their church. They picked their own church, and they are going to that church. And their youth leader is connecting with them both on Sundays at 1:00. They have a youth gathering, and on Wednesdays they have another Zoom youth gathering that's been a scavenger hunt or whatever. And my very cynical, very anti-church 12-year-olds look forward to those things all week. And so I think this is a really critical time for developing creative ways to be in touch with our youth to take formation outward. And I think that we're going to learn lots of things from this time with regards to youth.
And Elizabeth and the formation team are also working on guidelines even around younger children. I have a 4-year-old who kind of gets it most of the time. I have an 18-month-old who obviously doesn't get any kind of idea about social distancing or whatever too. So how do we do that? What's nursery protocol? What are those kind of things? So we're kind of working on those as we move closer to in-person gatherings.
And again, we are inviting your input. What are your ideas? Because, in this time of uncharted territory, sort of getting your ideas for how to do that in the most loving way will be helpful.
Speaking
Matthew, your question in terms of boilerplates, so that which is in front of you right now sort of builds the boilerplate for you. These kind of questions have been already used in a couple of parishes, and they're kind of ways that we've helped the process of putting the proposal together. And as soon as you put the proposal together, what Alex and I have both been doing is we end up having a Zoom conversation with that particular parish, their senior warden, their priest, and walk through what it is that your goal is. Where do you want to, where is the racking and stacking of community and conversation? It becomes, not a free-for-all, but it becomes a collegiate opportunity to do the best thing in that place for ministry.
So there's a lot of questions that you see is a little bit overwhelming. Our conversation is just that you've kind of looked at these. These will be sent out too, by the way, later. So you don't have to kind of get them all now. But to kind of frame our conversation and go forward, something to kind of think about as we move forward into this. These are just maybe a bit overwhelming. These are just the transition from season 1 to season 2, which I don't know. Maybe I'm optimistic, but I think will be probably our hardest transition. And then hopefully this one from season 2 to season 3 will be easier. Although I've been proven wrong a couple of times in this pandemic about things getting easier. So we shall see. But that is my hope, that we will have learned new skills during season 2 that will be helpful and beneficial to us as we transition way down the line into season 3.
Alex, this is Larry. May I say something? In addition to these questions, which will be very helpful, I think that that it's possible that we can do sort of an outline of a general boilerplate. But I think a really important part of that would not be just these nuts and bolts logistics, but the important pieces of the covenant. And I'm hopeful that you can remind people of where that is and what that's all about, because that's some like basic ground rules for all of us who are ultimately going back.
So our formation team put together a template for a covenant. It's just a starting point jump and to kind of frame it theologically. Many people have commented positively about us, about how we have framed things theologically, which is just how your bishop is wired. She kind of looks at things through that way and calls us to that. So we tasked the formation team to look at that. So that's been available at a previous thing. Mike, do you know, is that on the website anywhere?
The
covenant.
Yes, it is on that same page that I've posted the link.
Okay, great.
All resources are there.
So again, it's just, a resource to kind of jump onto. A pastorally sensitive thing to be aware of that came across as we put out this covenant, again, we got feedback in, is from some of our LGBTQ siblings that, especially of a certain age, it kind of could bring up some past trauma around the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Our goal was to take away shame about reporting and being a part of that, and realizing the way this disease works and stuff like that too, that we want to take away the shame around it. That was our intent, and try to frame that theologically. But I just want to put that out as something to be sensitive about, depending on your congregation or whatnot, to just to be aware of. I also want to say, in an effort to work together, Canon Carl and I are going to work on inviting people to groups that are similar average Sunday attendance. Average Sunday attendance is one metric we are using to look, but I think more importantly, it is about your physical space as well. But there will be some kind of things that will be, we hope, our intent is that will be, parishes in the same range to kind of think about, in some ways to kind of get to creative, and again, hear feedback from. So we'll be working on kind of inviting people to that conversation. But your most optimal thing is a smaller congregation in a really big building, which generally before this thing was not a good thing. But in this day and age, you will be able to return to more sense of normalcy a little bit quicker than some of the rest of the congregations out there. Again, depending obviously too that there's not a spike going on or something in your area as well. But those are kind of the optimal circumstances.
Alan, can we circle back? You can go ahead and put together a proposal plan with perspective anytime you wish, and we'd be more than happy to engage with it.
Yeah, we really want to be, and we know some people point out how labor intensive this is going to be for Carl and I, but we're willing to do it, and hopefully we can sustain this. And if not, we'll figure out a way to to do it differently. But the idea, and it probably won't just be even 95 congregations. We expect to have multiple conversations with people as we move through this season, maybe even the beginning of the season as we transition into. I don't know. I like talking to you guys. It'll be fun in some ways to kind of get and connect with you. I wish I would have known a little bit more of you, more interpersonal before all this happened, being fairly new to the diocese, but it just didn't work out that way. So we'll get to know each other this way, and that'll hopefully be a good thing. Any other questions? Covenant on the screen. I don't have that at my disposal. Mike, do you have the covenant handy? I can stop sharing. You can.
And Alex, this is Larry again. While you're looking for the covenant, I think a couple of things of that are really important. When I said in the reopening plan should, I think, include references to the covenant and some of the ground rules from that, including like wearing a mask and agreeing to the social distancing, but particularly a commitment that if someone is unwell, and not just with a diagnosed COVID virus, if someone is unwell or someone in his or her household is unwell, they do not come back to participate for a period of 14 days or something. I think that's really important that it appears in the reopening plan that people will know from the get-go what our ground rules are in terms of taking care of one another.
And I want to say too that my husband does work in one of those long-term care facilities that is being ravaged, and they retested everybody, and about 15 people presented without any symptoms. The whole building got tested. They had no idea. These people were not on their radar, no symptoms whatsoever. So there's a lot we don't know about this, so we're all kind of figuring this out. Could those questions be, yeah, we'll post them, we'll email them out, all be sent out. How much time should we, for turnaround, we ask permission conversation. We will, I don't know, Carl, how much turnaround? I will say this, we are taking a month to do this. And I think that was a very kind of wise decision. It's a little bit less than a month now. But the sooner you get those two, the better. The more time we kind of have to do that and kind of get ahead, and you can make plans, and if possible, you discern that there were revisions that you need to make as a result of our feedback, then you're kind of welcome to do that. If everybody turns in, if everybody gets on it and turns their plan in tomorrow, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming. But my guess is there's going to be some procrastinators out there like I've been guilty of from time to time, so they'll kind of trickle in, but we will get that to you. If you haven't heard anything, feel free to do that. We did notice, I will fully confess that some churches chose to live stream, and that process did not go as well as I would like, and we are trying to change that for this coming process as well. And we know a little bit more now and feel a little bit more confident in kind of making these things. But again, those original questions, which will be sent out, framing it in that respect will make the conversation go a little bit quicker, I think, and easier. So we have talked about, and Carl, I don't know if you want to say anything about age discrimination to older members.
Most of the older members, including the person speaking, is delighted to be discriminated against for my own sake. And so I would turn it around and go from the standpoint that you're helping to protect me in that capacity, and I'm grateful for it. There's a couple of points I'd like to make before we wander a little bit on any further. One of the things I've grown up to understand in Colorado is that, if you go up I-70 and you hit the tunnel, you think you're going up a mountain, and this is sort of how people keep looking at COVID. We go up to the top of the mountain when we'll be able to drive down the other side, and everything will be fine. Not. There's a whole bunch of other peaks that keep coming and showing up. And that's the way it just keeps going across Colorado until you get almost to Grand Junction. So we are going to have other peaks and valleys that we're going to need to pay attention to. And as said earlier, we're not 100% certain what we're doing anyway. The question and comment was made earlier about surveys, in terms of surveys for your congregations. A number of county libraries have already put out a number of them to the respective folks that they have. I'd borrow from them. They're really well written, very well written in terms of how do you feel safe coming back. They come from the perspective of what do you need from us as a library so you will feel comfortable in this building. One of the other people that I'd like to drag into this picture is a guy called Rich Munsell. Rich Munsell is my deputy, and he has been working extremely closely with me, and he and I spend maybe an hour plus a day working on these particular things just to be able to hopefully serve you and this diocese.
So thank all for free too. So thank you for that and everything you do. And Carl has to speak with me a lot too, which is
a challenge.
Challenge indeed. So, I think a lot of these specific questions we can kind of address kind of individually as we kind of move forward, and maybe address some of the groups that we kind of set up. And that we do believe there's some wisdom in the room too, in the sense of can bring stuff we haven't even thought about yet. But the idea of just to kind of take the extra protocol, to look at the CDC guidelines, look at local things about cleaning and the best way to do that, and especially the solutions you want to use. Certain things will not kill this virus that we use. So we need to be make sure that we're using the right products and not working in vain. Kill other stuff, but not necessarily this.
Right, and Chris Ditzenberger just launched a question about supplies being hard to come by, and that is something we've experienced in the Office of the Bishop. We actually got a call from our supplier that said, "We just got some Clorox wipes. Do you want them?"
Yes.
And we said, yes, we do. And so thank you and Mary Kate also looking into the possibility of how we get, looking forward, how we get supplies for disinfection.
Which may play into like your opening as well too. Like if you can't have the supplies or the safety, like that may be a little bit of thing that's kind of out of your control about safety type of thing too. So, I think there's going to be challenges. Luckily now, I think you can get paper towels, but some places, at least most places.
Oh my! So this question, it's my heart about is Eucharist only for the young and healthy, and is that okay? And I want to tell you that those are the things that keep me up at night. Those are the things that I spend a lot of prayer time over, because I actually believe if church is not church for the folks on the margin, it's not church.
Amen.
And in this time, I just have to confess that just kind of my deep struggle, and the thing that I pray most about is how do we hold all of our people? How are we the body of Christ for all of our people in this time? How do we keep from making certain of our folks, because of conditions they can't help, second-class citizens in our community? That is something I resist with all my heart, and I don't have any certainty on how to make that so, but I do believe if we all adopt a posture of how do we love one another the best way we can, if we all adopt a posture of how are we the body of Christ for one another, all of us, then the Spirit will move and we will come to a place. But I do hold that up for everyone.
And again, and we have some time to think about that, because the season 1 to 2, we're asking people not to engage in Eucharist. In season 2 is our goal, and partly for those reasons that we mentioned. The body of Christ does mean sacrifices. And sacrificing for the least of those, and to remember that we are one body, and to keep that in mind. So we will know a lot more, I think, as we transition from season 2 to 3. We've learned a lot more about this virus and ways that we can keep hopefully everyone safe and do Eucharist. And it may look different. I've talked to some priests who say, I don't want to do Eucharist until I can do it the way that I used to do it. So we're just going to hold, which is their choice. His or her choice to do that. And some people will, perhaps do some sense of modified or whatever it looks like when we move to that. I think, everyone's kind of there to make their own decisions, but to provide guidelines. We are asking as a body that we all kind of stay together on this through season 2 as a part of that together is our goal. And I am a very Eucharistically centered Christian, and I've not had Eucharist since at least March 17th, wherever the Sunday was kind of before that. And that's been hard for me as well.
The question was asked earlier of the governor in terms of, is public health going to come in and sanitize our buildings? There is a weekly meeting with clergy and the governor. And the governor was sort of stunned because he didn't see how anyone could expect public health, with all the work that they were doing, to come in and sanitize all the churches and synagogues and across the whole of the country, particularly Colorado. But he did make the quick observation is, he said, you all are still washing your hands with hot soapy water. That's still one of the most primary effective methods for cleaning. Hot water and soap.
Great. Any other questions? We're about at time. I kind of wanted to keep it to an hour. We started a little bit late, but we were kind of right at time. And again, echo, I can't think we can say enough. We want to be in conversation with you. Please talk to us as you kind of move forward. If you just want to bounce ideas off of, that's fine. I'll be available. You can reach me through, even though I'm not working from the office, you can reach me through my office number, which goes to my cell phone number. Email as well. We can set up a time for those who love Zoom and can't get enough of Zoom, like myself. We can set up a Zoom call if you want to do that and talk kind of face to face. We're here to support you as we all learn to navigate these moments, this adaptive moment, and where the world has changed around us together. So thank you all for your leadership and for everything that you are doing. It is great to see the creativity and the spirit that has been about. Bishop, you want to say real quick? I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot, but you say you had a great meeting with the wardens last night.
Yes, so we had our scheduled meeting for our time with the wardens of the Northwest region last night. We weren't able to do that in person, so we did that via Zoom, and it was just an amazing meeting. I left that meeting, I see some of you wardens on here. I want you to know I left that meeting so filled and so thankful for your leadership. You are amazing folks, and hearing all of the things that congregations are doing outside their buildings to be the church is amazing. I mean, it's just an amazing thing, the way that these wardens talked about the ministries that are ongoing in their communities. And I am deeply grateful for that and for all the work that all of you do as congregational leaders.
I could not make it, and she even texted me afterwards and said how great it was. Kind of rubbing in that I could not make it. So I apologize that I missed that. It's unfortunate. But anyway, be well, be safe, and above all, trust in God. Amen. Thank you all for your time.